Hello, welcome to Dry Creek Beekeeping. As of right now, I would say that the 2021 season for beekeeping is finally over, as it is spring now and my bees have started turning over from winter into spring, so I don't really have to worry about any winter issues, and that signals the start of a new season for beekeeping. In this video, I'm basically just going to be taking a look back at the 2021 season and kind of just reflecting on it, and then at the end of the video I'll talk about what I'm going to do this coming year and kind of my plans for the future. To start off my year last year, I had no hives because my one and only hive ended up dying from ventilation issues over the winter. So in response to that, I ordered 2 bee packages. One was from a local beekeeper and the other one came from Georgia. Those became the alpha hive and the beta hive respectively. Starting out that year, I had no idea that it would be as tricky as it was. And oh boy, it was like nothing I've ever dealt with before. Now, I'm not a very experienced beekeeper. This year is going to be my 4th year beekeeping. However, at least at this point, I like to consider myself to be at least advanced in beekeeping knowledge. I'm still by no means a professional. However, you guys, the ones watching this video, and more specifically the people who have left super helpful comments on my videos, have helped me a lot through this past season. Not only knowing what I was doing better, but also just improving me as a beekeeper in general. But I'm getting sidetracked. The first problem that I had was, of course, with the weather. The weather was kind of annoying last year for beekeeping because, to start, there was that extreme cold spell that affected the entire country and more specifically down south, to the point where all bee package deliveries were delayed by 2 weeks. This meant that I got my alpha hive in early May and my beta hive in mid-May. The alpha hive actually wasn't delayed by 2 weeks, it was only delayed by 1 week because it came from a local beekeeper. The beta hive, however, came from Georgia, and they were hit pretty hard by those cold spells. So it was delayed by 2. And I don't know if it was because of that delay that they had, or just because of the fact that they came from Georgia and they were now out of their element here in Northwest Illinois. But the beta hive is the hive that had the most problems through this past year. The first problem that I really noticed was the fact that it was simply not growing. It just would not, for whatever reason, grow. I don't really think it was the queen's egg laying rate. That seemed okay, but it was almost like the bees just weren't producing wax in order to build their hive. It was very strange. However, in late season, these issues kind of seemed to resolve themselves at least a little bit, and they grew quite rapidly. And so far this year, I've done 1 inspection on them where I've seen brood, and it seems like they're doing pretty decently now. The next big problem that I encountered affected both of my hives, and it was the raccoon that kept coming here and taking the entrance feeders off of my hives. This stunted their growth a little bit, and their growth was already stunted because of that delay. And that was pretty brutal because they not only destroyed the jars on my entrance feeders, but they also bumped around the hives and just generally caused a mess of everything. And the bees weren't getting any sugar water either. It got to the point where I had to replace the entrance feeders every day because overnight the raccoons would come and take the entrance feeders off, and it was just a pain. So I tried trapping them. They ended up being able to escape the traps, no problem somehow. And in the end, after about a 1-month struggle with these raccoons, I just ended up taking the entrance feeders off entirely and letting the bees do their own thing. Of course, the alpha hive wasn't really bothered by this. The only thing that they were bothered by was the drought. Last year, we had a severe drought in the area that I live, and it affected everything around here very greatly. From agriculture to streams drying up. I mean, heck, even the lake by where I live, the waterfall stopped flowing entirely for a week. It was just a really, really bad time. And due to this, the flowers weren't producing as much nectar because there weren't as many flowers out. And thus I had a pretty crappy years in terms of honey being produced. I ended up only getting about 30 to 40 pounds worth of honey off my alpha hive and nothing off my beta hive, which I wasn't really surprised about the beta hive not producing anything anyway, as they not only, as I mentioned before, had those problems growing, but also they were a first-year hive. They had to produce all of the wax themselves, whereas the alpha hive kind of had a jump start because I used all the frames from my previous colony that had died. During fall, I didn't have as bad of varroa mite issues that I've had in the past, and I don't really know what the reason for this is. It could be because of that drought that I mentioned. However, it didn't really matter in the end anyway, because I treated them for varroa mites just the same. That was kind of where the year ended. We had sort of an early start to winter in a way. It got cold pretty fast, but it stayed like just warm enough that it wasn't freezing, but it wasn't warm enough to check on my hives either. And that period of time lasted from about October through December. Actually, there was one day in December that it got up to 70 degrees and I was able to do a full hive inspection on that day. I still can't believe that happened. That was well beyond record-breaking warmth for the month of December. I really wasn't sure that my hives would make it out of winter this year because winter was very brutal. The temperature swings were ridiculous, going from like 40, 50, even 60, 70 degrees, as I mentioned, down into negative temperatures in just a few days, sometimes even just in one day. I think the coldest it got was about -22, if I remember correctly, and it was so cold that day that schools were canceling because of the cold. So I wasn't confident by any means that my hives would survive the winter. And on top of that, I actually didn't feed my hives hardly at all for the first half of winter. I only started feeding them in February, and that was dry granulated sugar that I fed them. And the reason I did this is because of the ventilation and moisture issues that I had had the previous year killing off my hive. I didn't want to risk anything. And honestly, I'm glad I didn't, because both my hives made it through winter. Now, looking at this coming year, I'm actually pretty hopeful for this year. Looking at the long-range weather outlooks, it looks like it's going to be a pretty decent year. There's a chance that's going to be another drought year, but it's not high enough to where I'm really worried. Also, I have big plans this year in terms of expanding honey production and the number of hives I have, since I am getting 2 more bee packages guaranteed from Georgia again. That might end up being a mistake, but we'll see. And I am also planning on splitting at least my alpha hive, if not both the hives, which that means in the best case scenario, I'm going to end up with 6 hives. However, 2 of these hives won't be staying around long, as I will be moving the splits to a farmer who's interested in having bees on his property. And hopefully that way I can actually get a lot more honey from those and also help out a local farmer. As honey production goes, I expect this will be a pretty good year too, as I'm expecting a profit of $1,200 to $2,400. This equates to about 100 to 200 pounds of honey. That's a pretty rough estimate though, and can vary wildly depending on the weather conditions we have this year and how my hives are doing in general. Given those factors, I could see anywhere from $0 to potentially up to $3,600, though quite frankly, that's pretty unrealistic. All in all, I'm expecting the 2022 beekeeping season to be a pretty good one, and I'm hoping to see a lot of growth, not only with expanding my hives, but also with the Dry Creek beekeeping business and honey production. I expect that I'm going to be spending a lot of money to grow my business this year, and I already have spent about $600 to get all of the new stuff for the 4 new hives that I'm going to be getting this year. Anyways, that brings us to the end of this video. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to leave a like and maybe even subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments about beekeeping, feel free to leave a comment. I'll see you guys in the next video.